Hi, my name is Maylee, and a month before I gave birth, my parents told me there was no room for me in the house I grew up in. They packed my things while I was at a doctor's appointment. They turned my childhood bedroom into a nursery for my sister's baby. But it didn't stop there. They forged my signature, rewrote my address on legal forms, and even used my name to raise money online. I watched them erase me like I had never existed. How does a family become the very storm they swore to protect you from? And what do you do when the only people who should have fought for you quietly hand you over instead? I remember the exact color of the napkins, cream with a faint gold trim. Vera always insisted on matching the napkins to the season, and since it was the dead of winter, she said gold added warmth. What I didn't realize then was that warmth had long since left this house. And tonight, it was just a backdrop for something colder than any snowstorm Idaho had seen. The table was set for 6, but something was off. My name wasn't on a place card. I stood there for a beat, waiting for someone to notice. Maybe Vera would glance up from her perfect arrangement of silverware and say, "Oh, honey, I forgot yours. Sit wherever you want." But she didn't. She was too busy nudging Kalista's plate a millimeter to the left. So, I sat, quietly, in the only empty seat, far right, next to Wendell, who offered me a half-smile, like he knew something I didn't. Kalista was already mid-sentence about stroller brands. "The one I picked has shock absorbers," she said, flipping her shiny hair over one shoulder. "You know, for uneven pavement and all." I nodded, unsure whether to laugh or choke. Her voice felt like background static. I rested a protective hand on my belly, 8 months pregnant and counting, still getting used to how my body moved now. They knew I'd had a rough week, but not one of them asked how my appointment went. Kalista didn't stop. "I'm thinking of painting the nursery a soft sage. You know, gender neutral, but elevated." Vera beamed. "That'll photograph beautifully. Imagine the light in your sister's old room. Big windows, no noise from the street. Perfect." That pause. That word. Your sister's old room. I didn't catch it then. Not completely. But something inside me twitched. Dinner continued with the usual pretense. Roast chicken, mashed potatoes, steamed carrots with a hint of honey. Kalista had second helpings. Wendell refilled his wine. And I tried to be invisible. Not out of shame, but self-preservation. "You're awfully quiet tonight, Maylee," Vera said, not looking at me, just folding her napkin with surgical precision. "I'm just tired," I replied, sipping water. "The baby's been pressing on my ribs." She offered a polite smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Well, you've always been a little sensitive." Wendell chuckled lightly, then cleared his throat. Kalista avoided my gaze. I noticed how Vera kept checking her phone under the tablecloth, whispering now and then to Kalista, who responded with vague nods. Something was coming. I just didn't know what. When the dish I loved most appeared, for a brief second, I softened. Chicken pot pie, flaky, buttery, with just enough thyme. It was a staple of my childhood. I hadn't had it in years. Vera set the dish in front of me. "Your favorite," she said flatly. I smiled, honestly surprised. "Wow, I haven't had this since college. Still my favorite." Vera's hand paused, knife clinking against ceramic. "That was never your favorite. You just made that up." The words dropped into the room like a stone into a still pond. I blinked. Okay." Kalista giggled, too loud. Wendell focused on his plate. I pushed the food aside. Appetite gone. It wasn't about the dish. It was the rewriting of my history, like my memories weren't valid unless Vera agreed with them. That meal had once comforted me through breakups, failed exams, and lonely nights. But now it felt like a stranger on a plate. Dessert arrived, store-bought lemon bars. Vera hated baking, but always said presentation mattered more than origin. As plates were cleared, Vera looked up with that same polite, hollow smile. "We've made a decision," she began. Wendell adjusted his glasses. "It's time you thought about other arrangements." I frowned. I don't understand. There's no room for you here anymore, Maylee, Vera said. You're nearly due, and Kalista needs a quiet, safe place to bring up her baby. Kalista interjected, tone rehearsed. It's not personal, it's just structure, space, safety. I stared at them. I looked to Wendell, my last hope for reason. He nodded slowly. We just think it's for the best. For who? For the baby, Vera replied, as if the answer were obvious. Kalista's baby. I looked around. My eyes landed on the hallway wall, where all the family pictures hung. Mine was missing. They had planned this. They had rehearsed this. I was the only one surprised. I stood slowly, chair scraping the hardwood. Excuse me, I said. My voice wasn't trembling. That surprised even me. I grabbed my coat from the rack, same one I'd used all through high school. The same coat Vera once said made me look too broad in the shoulders. I noticed a new frame had replaced the one with my high school graduation photo. It was a print that said, "Family means everything." I didn't cry. I didn't argue. But I knew one thing. They were done with me. And this time, I wouldn't be quiet. The morning air was colder than usual, even for Boise in December. I sat on the edge of the bed and pulled on my sneakers with slow, aching hands. The baby had shifted again last night, low and heavy, and I hadn't gotten more than 2 straight hours of sleep. Still, I had a checkup scheduled. I was trying to stay on top of things, at least the ones I still had control over. I noticed something strange before I even stood up. My overnight bag, the one I kept half-packed just in case I went into labor early, wasn't under the bed anymore. I crouched down, awkwardly, belly first, and reached for where it should have been. Gone. I checked the closet next. The shelf where I kept my folded maternity sweaters was half empty. The baby shower invitations Vera insisted we print? Nowhere. A quiet throb started at the base of my skull. In the kitchen, there was no smell of toast, no soft sound of the coffee maker, no ceramic mug sitting at Vera's usual place near the window. The house was too still. That sort of stillness only happens when everyone is already in motion somewhere else. I checked my phone. One new text. Hope the checkup goes well. Change is coming. Kalista. I stared at it, reading it twice, then a third time. What kind of change? Why now? I made it to my appointment, trying to push the weirdness aside. I listened to the doctor's calm voice as she measured my belly and checked the baby's heartbeat. All good. All normal. Except nothing else in my life was. I held it together through the visit, smiled politely, and didn't bring up the aching thought that something had shifted at home while I was gone. When I pulled into the driveway, I felt it before I saw it. A large white moving truck was backed into the front lawn, angled like it had been there for hours. The company name was stenciled in fading blue letters on the side. Easy Haul. We move anything. And there, on the grass, were boxes. My boxes. Not ones I'd packed. Someone else had labeled them in thick black marker. Closet. Maylee. Old books. Baby stuff. I slammed the car door harder than I meant to. My feet hit the sidewalk, and my palms began to sweat. Vera stood at the top of the driveway with her arms crossed over her cardigan. She didn't look surprised to see me. "We thought we'd help you get started," she said, like she was announcing a PTA bake sale. "You were always independent." Kalista appeared from behind her, sipping something from a white tumbler with gold cursive that read Mom to Be. She smiled, thin, rehearsed. I scanned the boxes again. One of them was filled with my baby's clothes, still wrapped in plastic. Onesies I'd picked out alone at Target 3 months ago, during a quiet afternoon I hadn't told anyone about. "What is this?" My voice cracked despite my best effort. Vera tilted her chin. "A transition. You need a clean start, and the house is full." "Full of what? Guilt, or just Kalista's things?" Her jaw tightened. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be." I took a slow step forward. "You packed up my life without asking." Kalista shrugged. "You tend to overreact. This way is smoother for everyone." I opened a box. My baby blanket, mine, not the baby's, was stuffed between nursing pads and the ultrasound photo I'd taped to my mirror. I backed away, my hand trembling against my side. A breeze caught the edge of a flattened cardboard box leaning against the porch, and it flapped once, then settled like a period at the end of a sentence. Just then, a familiar voice called out. Mrs. Dayton, the neighbor from 3 doors down, passed with her beagle on a leash. "Oh, big day, huh?" she said cheerily. Vera answered with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "We're just helping Maylee transition. She's been having trouble adjusting, you know how it is." Then louder, as if on stage. "Some people don't appreciate what's done for them. That's the problem with this generation." My throat dried instantly. I turned to the truck driver, who looked from me to Vera, unsure. "Please don't load anything else," I said. "These are my things." He looked like he wanted to vanish. "Ma'am, I was told to." "She's emotional," Kalista cut in. 8 months in. Hormones make everything seem bigger." Mrs. Dayton kept walking, pretending she didn't hear. I couldn't breathe. I turned and walked into the house, what used to be my home, my fingers curling into fists. The room was empty. Not bare. Empty. It echoed. That night, I lay on the mattress Vera left behind. She called it a courtesy. The springs creaked with every breath I took. I held my phone above me, scrolling through housing listings, legal aid numbers, support groups. An article caught my eye. If you don't stand up for yourself, they'll tell your story for you and erase you from it. I bookmarked it. Then I opened the Notes app, realized I couldn't focus on a screen, and grabbed a pen from my purse. In the only clean page left in my planner, I wrote, "They think I'll disappear quietly. They're wrong." 2 nights on a friend's lumpy pull-out couch left me with a backache and a resolve I didn't expect. I wasn't returning for a confrontation. I'd already learned how pointless that was. I was just going to collect what was left of my things. The rest, I assumed, had already been folded, boxed, and labeled in someone else's handwriting. As I pulled up to the house, I noticed the driveway was clear. No moving truck, no plastic storage bins. Just silence. And that new kind of silence you start to recognize. The kind that comes after people have said all they wanted to say and left no room for your version. The front door was unlocked. I stepped inside quietly, almost like a visitor who knew they didn't belong. The living room had the same rug, same throw pillows, same stale air freshener. But something felt off. Again. I walked toward my old room slowly. I knew the door wouldn't be mine anymore. Still, nothing prepared me for what I saw when I pushed it open. The walls had been repainted a muted sage green. A mobile hung from the ceiling, dangling soft pastel animals in a slow, pointless spin. A changing table sat where my dresser used to be. Stickers of clouds and stars were half applied along the window trim. The room wasn't just repurposed, it had been emotionally repaved. Every trace of me had been scrubbed out and replaced with a curated Instagram nursery. My mattress, the one Vera insisted I take, as a courtesy, was shoved against the wall, folded in half like an afterthought. I stepped in and turned in place, absorbing the details. On the nightstand sat Kalista's tablet, unlocked, screen-lit. I couldn't help myself. The screen showed a Pinterest board titled Baby Micah's Dream Room. Dozens of pins, minimalist crib designs, natural light hacks, handmade mobiles. One image caught my eye. It was my old dresser, now repainted white, with Maylee's old dresser, repaint, written underneath. Another board linked to a baby registry that included nursery essentials already in progress. My bookshelf, my lamp, even the laundry basket I bought with my first paycheck. Behind me, I heard footsteps. Kalista's voice rang out mid-conversation as she walked into the room, phone pressed to her ear. "Yeah, she's being dramatic. We already moved most of her stuff out. Honestly, she was never that maternal." She froze when she saw me standing there. Her mouth tightened, then opened. "Oh, I didn't know you were coming today," she said, like I'd wandered into a stranger's house uninvited. I didn't answer. I couldn't. My eyes landed on a trash bag in the corner, one of those giant black ones used for leaves or garage clutter. I walked over and reached inside. A framed photo of me at graduation, cap slightly tilted, holding my diploma, forced smile, was jammed between what looked like an old textbook and a roll of wrapping paper. I pulled it out, glass cracked diagonally through my face. For a moment, I just stared. Then I set it gently on the changing table, careful not to disturb the lavender-scented wipes Kalista had neatly stacked. "I'll finish up quick," I said without looking at her. She stood frozen in the doorway, awkward now. "I didn't mean it like that," she offered weakly. I ignored her. That evening, back at the couch that had become my new base, I got a ping on my phone. It was a screenshot from Amber, an old college friend who still kept tabs on family drama, even though we rarely talked anymore. The screenshot showed Kalista's Facebook post from earlier that afternoon. The photo was of a neatly folded baby blanket with caption text that read, "Stealing from your unborn nephew? Some people have no shame." No names were mentioned, but the comments made it clear who she meant. "Wow, you deserve better, Kalista." "Disgusting. Can't believe your own family would do that." "Typical jealous sibling behavior." I stared at the screen for a long time. My fingers hovered over the keyboard to reply, to defend myself, to clarify, to destroy. But I didn't type a word. I saved the screenshot. Then I opened the Notes app again and added a new section to my growing file: Digital Manipulation and Public Image Strategy. I opened my camera and began cataloging everything from my visit earlier: the nursery photos, the tablet screen, the dresser now unrecognizable, the trash bag with my diploma. My voice was quiet, even to myself. "You don't come for me with lies. I've been silent, but I don't stay that way." 3 days after I stood in the middle of my stolen nursery, I found myself sitting in the back row of the Ridgeview Community Center. I hadn't planned on attending the meeting. It wasn't my crowd, and I sure wasn't in the mood to nod along to polite civic updates and budget votes. But when I overheard Vera on the phone saying, "They asked me to speak about family legacy," something in me told me to be there. I slipped in quietly and took a seat against the wall, the one near the fire exit. No one noticed. No one ever really does until you make noise. The room buzzed with familiar faces: church ladies with matching scarves, retirees who ran the food pantry, a few men in baseball caps who always seemed to show up for these things. I watched them nod to Vera as she made her way to the front, her posture perfect, smile effortless. Kalista trailed behind, wearing a fitted dress that accentuated her bump like it was a trophy. The moderator tapped the mic. "Tonight, we're pleased to welcome Vera Whitlow, a longtime neighbor, mentor, and mother, to speak about building strong families in our community." Applause broke out. I felt my fingers dig into my thighs. Vera stepped up with rehearsed grace. "Thank you for that warm introduction. As many of you know, our family has lived here for nearly 3 decades. We've seen good times, hard times, but through it all, we've leaned on values: faith, respect, sacrifice." I kept my eyes on the floor, but my ears couldn't help but soak in every polished word. "Sometimes, as parents," she continued, "we have to make hard choices for the greater good. Because building a legacy isn't about preserving what was, it's about preparing for what will be." There was a pause, intentional. She looked out into the audience like she was delivering scripture. A home isn't just about walls. It's about who deserves the space to grow. My vision blurred. I blinked hard, swallowing the fire crawling up my throat. Then, she cued the slideshow. The screen flickered to life behind her, and the first image popped up. My old bedroom, repainted, rearranged, sterilized into something catalog perfect. The caption read, "Room for New Life." There was an audible "Oh!" from a few women in the front. Kalista wiped at her eye like she hadn't orchestrated every inch of it. I gripped the metal chair so tightly, my knuckles turned pale. They didn't just erase me, they framed me out. After the applause died down, The room moved on to the next agenda item. No one turned to me. Not a single person looked my way. I had become the smudge they didn't want on the family portrait. By the time I got back to the couch I now slept on, the air felt heavier. I tried to distract myself, folded laundry I didn't need to fold, cleaned an already clean counter. I was pouring myself a glass of water when my phone buzzed. A message from Elise, my old roommate in Portland. You've seen this, right? Attached was a link to a GoFundMe page. Build baby Micah a safe haven. At first, I thought it was a mistake. But when I clicked the link, I saw the header image. My room, my floors, my old curtains still in the window. The write-up was worse than the slideshow. Sacrifices were made by all. Some chose to let go of comfort for the next generation. Help us create the nurturing space baby Micah deserves. Raised so far $700. Donors included Mrs. Langston from church, my sophomore English teacher, and a neighbor who once told me I had potential. I sat down slowly, the screen lighting my face in the dark. They were monetizing my eviction, my walls, my view, my history. It was all being sold in digestible lies, framed as a noble transition. And no one questioned it, because no one ever does when the lie sounds like love. I scrolled further, took screenshots of every name, every comment, saved the images, backed them up. Then I opened the folder I'd created 2 nights earlier. Evidence of coercion and public defamation. I uploaded everything. I pulled out a notebook from the side table and wrote a single line. People will believe whatever's presented well. It's time I present the truth. Then I bookmarked the Idaho Tenant Rights page, a local housing justice nonprofit, and a law blog on residency manipulation. They wanted to build their empire. Fine. I was about to introduce them to what foundation really means. The envelope was thick, tucked neatly into my borrowed mailbox at the apartment where I was temporarily crashing. No return address, just my name, misspelled, written in Vera's curvy cursive across the front. Inside, a motel keycard, a printed receipt under the name Jane Doe, and a short note on cream stationery. It's not permanent, the note read. Think of this as space for everyone to reset. Everyone. I stared at the keycard, then the name again. Jane Doe. My hands trembled slightly, not from shock, but something worse, familiarity. The kind of hollow recognition you feel when the people who are supposed to know you best treat you like a placeholder. Later that day, I drove to the motel out by the freeway. I didn't pack. There was nothing left to take. The front desk clerk didn't even blink at the alias. Jane Doe, room 217, he said, sliding the key across the counter. Then he looked up, glanced down at my belly, and added, softer, been there. The room was gray. Not intentionally styled that way. It was just tired, like everything in it had seen better years, and decided not to try anymore. The bleach smell hit me first. Then the air conditioner kicked on with a sputter. On the TV, the welcome screen read, "Welcome, guest." No name, no nothing. I set the key on the side table, sat down slowly on the edge of the bed, and stared at the mirror above the dresser. I said my name out loud. Maylee. Again. Maylee Whitlow. I kept repeating it until it didn't sound like a name anymore, just syllables echoing back at me from a space too hollow to hold them. That night, I couldn't sleep. My brain wouldn't stop rerunning the slideshow of everything that led here. My boxes on the curb, my room stripped and staged, Vera's voice describing my erasure as family legacy. Around 4 a.m., I gave up. I picked up my phone, opened social media, and started scrolling. I don't know what I was hoping to find. Maybe a message from someone asking if I was okay. Instead, I found a post from Kalista. A photo of the nursery, my former bedroom. Sunlight poured in through the window I used to read under. The caption said, "Making room for real love." Hashtags followed. Gratitude, your family first. We chose love. I stared at it for a full minute before I felt the burn. It wasn't rage at first. It was this deep, twisting nausea that started low in my gut and climbed up my spine. The comments were worse. "You're glowing! So proud of you, Kalista. Every baby deserves a space filled with love." No one questioned anything. No one asked why her nursery looked so lived in. I took screenshots, every comment, every like, every reply. Then I opened a new folder in my phone's drive and titled it Digital Exhibits, Timeline of Dehumanization. The name made me laugh, not because it was funny, but because I realized how clinical I had become, how survival had shifted me from grieving to documenting. The next morning, my phone rang. I almost didn't answer, but when I saw the name Henley, I did. "Hey," she said, voice low like she was calling from a quiet office or a moment of stolen privacy. "I saw the moving truck a few days ago, and then that post." My throat tightened. I didn't say anything. Henley continued, "Listen, I don't know everything that's going on, but I do know your name wasn't listed on the community board for nursery donors." I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. "Because it's not my nursery," I said. "I figured," she replied. "Anyway, I've got a security cam. Been recording the street for years. I might have something you'd want." My fingers clenched around the phone. "Really?" She didn't hesitate. "I don't know your plan, but if you're building one, I've got receipts." It was the first time in days someone spoke to me like I still mattered. That night, I sat on the stiff motel bed, surrounded by legal pads, old bank statements, and my notebook. I placed the motel keycard in a plastic sleeve, labeled the page Control Tactics, and slid it into the binder. Then I whispered to myself, more like a vow than a thought. It's not about moving back in. It's about never being moved out of my own life again. Monday morning came with gray skies and a weight in my chest I couldn't stretch away. I had told myself I wasn't going back to that house. Not after the nursery, not after the motel key, not after the GoFundMe. But I needed my birth certificate. Hospitals don't wait for you to heal from betrayal before asking for paperwork. When I stepped onto the porch, I noticed the planter by the door was gone, replaced with a wooden sign that read, "Home is where baby grows." I let myself in with the spare key that Vera, in a rare moment of forced civility, hadn't reclaimed. The living room was quiet. I paused by the hallway, where the photo wall hung like a timeline of curated love. Except it wasn't a timeline anymore. It was a revision. My graduation photo, cap tilted, awkward smile, red lipstick Kalista once said made me look desperate, was gone. In its place, a framed ultrasound of Kalista's baby, backed by a glittery mat, and engraved plaque that read, "Welcome, baby Micah." I stood there. My hand drifted up toward the glass, hovering, unsure if I wanted to touch it or rip it off the nail. Vera's voice came from behind me, calm as ever. "We needed to make space for what's next." I didn't turn around. "You could have moved any photo. You didn't have to move mine." She exhaled, like I was being unreasonable. "It's not that serious, Maylee." My lips parted, but no sound came out. I wasn't going to get through to her, and I knew it. I scanned the rest of the wall. Every photo that once had me in it, solo shots, birthday parties, even my college acceptance party, gone. Replaced with staged baby shower previews and family photos where I simply wasn't invited. One photo remained, a group shot from a camping trip when I was maybe 7. I was barely visible, wedged behind a folding chair, and the frame was half covered by a dangling coat. Kalista walked past behind Vera, casually sipping from another one of her Pinterest-worthy mugs. She slowed just enough to say, "It looks cleaner, doesn't it? More unified?" I clenched my fists at my sides. She didn't wait for a response. I headed toward the office, where I knew Vera kept her files. The desk drawer was locked now, though it never used to be. I found her spare key still taped under the drawer and fished out the manila folder labeled Vital Records. My birth certificate was right where it should be, thankfully untouched. As I slipped it into my bag, my phone vibrated. A number I didn't recognize, but local. "Hello? Maylee Whitlow?" the woman asked. "This is Denise from the Whitman College Financial Office." My heart paused mid-beat. "Yes?" "I wanted to confirm you were aware that your education fund has been redirected." My voice dropped. "Redirected to who?" "It was officially transferred last week. The trustee, your mother, requested the funds be moved to a new beneficiary, baby Micah Whitlow." I swallowed hard. That fund was set up by my grandfather. "Yes, ma'am, we have that noted. But since you didn't access it by the age of 30, and your mother is the listed administrator," her voice blurred after that. "Something about policy, something about intended use. None of it mattered." "Amount?" I asked, cutting her off. $14,800. Gone. I ended the call. The silence that followed felt louder than her voice ever was. That money had been a lifeline, a promise made by a man who saw me before anyone else did. He opened it the day I got into college, told me it was so I'd never have to ask anyone for help if I wanted to start again. And now it belonged to a baby that hadn't even been born yet. A baby whose existence was used as the weapon to erase mine. I walked out without another word. Not even Vera followed me to the door. Outside, the sky had started to drizzle. I stood on the porch, looked up, and let the cold drops hit my face without flinching. Then I pulled out my phone and texted Henley. "I'm ready. Start forwarding everything." I slipped the birth certificate into my bag and zipped it shut. They replaced my face, my fund, my future. Now, I'll replace their silence with the truth. The call came just after dusk. Vera's voice was its usual calm, just slightly slower, like she'd taken a deep breath before dialing. "We'd like to talk. No fighting, just a conversation." I knew what that meant. She didn't want closure. She wanted to manage the fallout before I made it worse, for them. Still, I went. Henley dropped me off a block away. "You sure?" she asked. I nodded. "Text me when you're done." The house looked exactly the same. Lights on, porch swept, the lawn trimmed like it hadn't just become the scene of a quiet war. I walked in through the front door, which Vera had left slightly ajar. She met me in the living room, smile measured. "We just want what's best for everyone, Maylee." Wendell wasn't in the room. Kalista was on the couch, flipping through her phone like she couldn't be bothered. I sat down, carefully, legs aching from the weight I now carried in more ways than one. Vera slid a manila envelope across the coffee table. "We'd like to help you get settled. There's $1,500 in a transfer ready for you. If you sign this." I didn't touch the envelope. "What is it?" "Just a statement, saying you were never a permanent resident here, that the house isn't your legal residence and hasn't been for some time." I stared at her. "You're trying to erase me on paper now?" She didn't flinch. "It's cleaner this way. It gives everyone a clean break. You'll have fewer strings attached." I picked up the paper, read the first few lines. "I am not, nor have I ever been, a legal occupant of the property at—" I stopped. I stood and walked to the hallway, the one with the old doorframe where Vera used to mark our heights. My initials were still faintly visible from age 11, right under Kalista's by 2 inches. I ran my fingers across the groove in the wood. Tell that to the pencil marks under this paint. When I turned around, Kalista was still on the couch, pretending she hadn't heard. I walked back to the table, folded the paper neatly, and placed it on top of the envelope. "You'll need a better offer. And a better lie." Just then, Wendell walked in, coffee mug in hand. He glanced at the table, at the paper, at me. "Dad," I said, "you're really okay with this?" He hesitated. His eyes dropped to his shoes before he muttered, "I support your mother. This isn't my battle." That hit harder than I expected. I nodded, lips pressed tight. He wasn't choosing her over me. He was choosing comfort over conflict. That's worse. I picked up my bag, adjusted my coat. I didn't yell. I didn't slam anything. I just walked out. Henley's car was waiting, engine still running. I slid into the passenger seat and stared straight ahead. "Well?" she asked. I held out my hand. "You said you had something." She reached into the center console and pulled out a USB drive. "They forgot I've had a doorbell cam for the last 3 years." I turned the drive in my fingers, the small metal thing suddenly feeling heavier than it should. "Then let's make this count." Saturday afternoon crept in slowly. The air had a stillness to it, like the city knew something was shifting and chose to hush itself in anticipation. Henley and I sat at her kitchen table, which doubled as my war room now. Her laptop was open, cords tangled, papers spread across the wood like a map of my unraveling past. She inserted the USB drive and clicked open the first folder. It was all there. Footage from her doorbell camera. Clear as daylight. Kalista, hands on hips, directing movers like a scene out of a bad home renovation show. Vera following behind, pointing into boxes with the kind of authority that said, "This space is mine now." We watched in silence. Neither of us said a word until Henley leaned back and muttered, "You've got a paper trail and a visual roadmap of betrayal." I nodded. Now I need a courthouse and a chair. That night, I met with someone at the legal aid office, Jacob, a soft-spoken paralegal who looked no older than 24, but carried the weight of stories like mine behind tired eyes. He sifted through the binder I brought, screenshots, emails, timestamps, still frames from the footage. "Most people come in here with tears," he said, flipping a page. "You brought timestamps." "I've cried," I replied. "Now I file." The complaint covered a lot. Unauthorized removal of property, verbal coercion, manipulation of legal residence. He made a copy of everything, careful and methodical, and handed me a folder stamped client copy. As I walked back to Henley's, my phone buzzed with a local housing link. While waiting at a crosswalk, I clicked it out of habit and scrolled without much thought, until something caught my eye. A draft public record for a birth certificate. Baby Micah Whitlow, place of birth, St. Thomas Medical, residential address, my apartment, my exact unit. My feet stopped moving. They didn't just move me out. They put her in. On paper. As if I'd never been there. I took a screenshot. Then another, just in case. I saved the record, printed a PDF copy through Henley's printer the moment I got back. She found me standing over the pages, face pale. "What now?" she asked gently. "They used my address," I said. "Her baby's birth certificate. It says she lives in my apartment." Henley didn't respond at first. Then she pulled out 2 mugs, poured tea, and slid one toward me. "Time to bury them in truth." We spent the rest of the afternoon arranging the evidence by category: visual, digital, legal. Her muted television played reruns of a courtroom drama in the background. I glanced up once, saw a lawyer deliver a closing argument, then looked back at the pile of documents in front of me. "The difference between villains and victims?" I said, almost to myself. "Records. Let's make mine permanent." The envelope arrived on a Tuesday morning. It was glossy, too heavy for what it contained, and smelled faintly of lavender, the kind Vera always used to dab on linens. Gold-embossed script danced across the front. "Please join us in blessing baby Micah's room." I stared at it for a full minute. My name was typed at the top of the invitation like it was some cruel joke. And there, in neat font below the baby shower details, was the address. My old room. They had turned my former space, my home, into a stage, and now they were throwing a party to celebrate the theft. I dropped the envelope on the counter, walked away. Then I came back and photographed it. They hadn't just removed me. They had memorialized the absence like it was an achievement. That evening, Henley called. "I saw them putting up a banner," she said. "It's got Micah's name in baby blue and silver stars. I think they're live streaming the event." Of course they were. I sat in the dark, phone propped against a pillow, watching the shaky feed come through. Neighbors walked through the space I once called mine, complimenting the new crib, the wall art, the light. Kalista stood in front of the camera, one hand on her bump, the other holding a glass of lemonade. "Thanks to everyone who believed in this space, even when some didn't think we deserved it," she said, her smile wide and staged. A few guests chuckled. Applause followed. Henley muted the video. "You okay?" I didn't answer. I just said, "Let's go to the mediation." 2 days later, we walked into the community room reserved for family resolution cases. Neutral paint, a single table, chairs too stiff to slouch in. The mediator was already seated, clipboard in hand. Vera wore her pearls. Kalista had on that same performative pastel dress. Wendell looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. "Maylee," the mediator nodded toward me. "You requested this session. Please begin." I reached into my bag and laid out the folders. First came the photos, screenshots from Kalista's fundraiser post, captions dripping with faux grace. Then the doorbell footage, movers carrying out my belongings, Vera pointing like a foreman. The room fell still. I slid across printouts of group chats about the nursery planning, my old lamp labeled reuse, my dresser tagged paint white. Kalista's voice cracked. "We didn't steal. We just thought she'd outgrown the space." Vera remained composed until I placed the last item on the table. The document she'd tried to get me to sign. The one denying I ever lived there. I let it sit a moment before flipping it open, showing her signature already scribbled at the bottom. The mediator leaned forward. "This is no longer a family misunderstanding," she said. "This crosses into coercion and displacement." Wendell dropped his gaze. The silence that followed didn't feel like discomfort. It felt like admission. I stood. No yelling, no speeches, just truth. "You taught me," I said, looking at Vera, "that home is where the truth lives, so I brought the truth with me." I pulled out one final envelope, sealed, lawyer's name printed clearly on the front, and slid it across the table. "My attorney will be in touch." Then I turned, walked out of the room without waiting for a response. This time, the exit was mine to choose. 1 week after the mediation, I found myself sitting across from my attorney in a small office above a dentist's clinic on Fairview Avenue. The windows buzzed from faulty insulation, and the coffee tasted like regret. But the folder in front of me made it worth every bitter sip. He laid out the papers methodically, my original address listed on utility bills, a notarized rental agreement from 3 years ago, and then the bombshell. A new lease agreement filed just weeks ago, transferring property control from Vera to Kalista, and at the bottom of that forged agreement, a signature that looked eerily like mine. He tapped his finger against the name. "They forged your consent to relinquish tenancy," he said. I stared at the looped M in Maylee, the exaggerated tail of the Y. It was close, but not mine. My hand hovered over the page as if touching it might somehow erase it. They wrote me out of a home I never left. My voice was calm, but my jaw ached from how tightly I clenched it. Henley was waiting in the car when I walked out. I climbed into the passenger seat, my hands still shaking slightly. "They filed a new lease with her name. They used my signature." She didn't look surprised. "The timeline of your eviction overlaps perfectly with the filing. They thought you wouldn't check." "They bet on silence," I said, finally exhaling. "They lost on my memory." That night, Henley invited me to her garage. It was cluttered, smelled faintly of motor oil and sage, and in the corner sat her old laptop on a workbench. She tapped the touchpad, and the screen lit up. "I was going to wait," she said, "but I think you're ready." The first video showed Vera and Kalista in her driveway. Kalista was pacing, phone to her ear. Vera leaned against the car, arms folded. "She'll fold," Kalista said clearly. "She always wants to be the good daughter." Vera laughed softly. "By the time she figures it out, we'll be 2 baby showers in." The audio stopped, and the silence that followed burned hotter than any argument ever could. Henley didn't say a word. She didn't need to. I stared at the screen for a long moment. Then I whispered, "Thank you." "I kept it back," she finally said, "until I knew you were ready to hear it." I nodded. I didn't sleep that night. I opened my laptop and started uploading files. Screenshots, documents, the lease, the recordings, everything. I created a private page on a blog I hadn't touched since college. I named it Documenting Displacement. The final video I uploaded was silent, just footage from Henley's camera. No narration, no captions, just shots of my boxed belongings on the curb, the room before and after, and the moment Kalista pointed at my dresser, and Vera nodded. The next morning, I walked into my attorney's office and handed him a flash drive. "Make it public," I said. "Everything." He didn't ask why. He just nodded and opened his laptop. As I left the building, I checked the blog one last time on my phone. The video had been viewed 48 times in the first hour. You can destroy a home, I thought, watching my reflection flicker in the glass door. But not the memory of who lived there. Henley's kitchen had become my sanctuary. 2 weeks after filing, it felt less like I was crashing and more like I belonged. The clink of mugs, the scent of cinnamon tea, her calm pacing around the table. These small domestic sounds softened the noise that had consumed my life for months. Kalista had gone silent online. The fundraiser vanished. The once daily posts had stopped altogether. A few of her followers turned, leaving comments that were quickly deleted. "This feels wrong. Why didn't anyone say anything?" Vera had pulled back too. No more volunteer updates. Her name wasn't on the neighborhood newsletter last week. I heard from a neighbor that she didn't attend Sunday service. Even Wendell, who used to sit at the same booth at Nelson's Diner every Wednesday, hadn't been seen in almost 2 weeks. But it wasn't satisfaction I felt. Not quite. It was quiet. Like walking into a room where the fire's already gone out, but the air still smells like something burned. That kind of quiet. That evening, I opened my email and stared at a message from my Aunt Laurel. Subject line: I didn't know. The body was short. "I'm sorry, Millet. If you ever need anything, please reach out." I didn't reply. I didn't even type a response. I just saved it in a folder labeled Bridges. Another message came from Marcy, a woman from our old church choir. It took courage. I wish I'd said something sooner. I saw the signs. I just didn't know what to do. I didn't blame them. I wasn't angry. But I didn't respond to her either. Apologies don't always rebuild what was burned. Sometimes, they're just the markers showing how far the flames reached. Later that night, I sat alone in my new apartment. It was small, no frills, but it was mine. A quiet hum from the fridge filled the room. I lit a single candle, not for mood, just to push back the dark, and sat at the kitchen table with a notebook and pen. I started writing a letter. Not an email, not a text. A letter I would never send. "Dear Mom and Dad," it began. "You didn't lose a daughter. You gave her away." I paused, then wrote, "I wish I could hate you. It would be easier than forgiving from this distance." I read it out loud to no one, then folded it in half and tucked it into the drawer beneath my sink, the one I labeled unfinished. The next morning, I unpacked the last box. I took out a soft baby blanket, still folded neatly from the day I bought it. I placed it in the bassinet I'd set up by the window. Then came a copy of my birth certificate, the same one I had fought to retrieve. At the bottom of the box sat the notebook, my war journal. Pages full of timestamps, screenshots, names, moments. I ran my hand over the cover once, then slid it into a drawer marked Legal. I looked around the room. There wasn't much on the walls yet, but I had one frame left in my hand. I hung it on a nail by the front door. It was a photo of me. No one else. Just me. Smiling. 8 months pregnant. Tired, yes, but whole. I didn't reclaim my place in their home. I claimed a new one, where I'm finally the one who stays. The county hearing room was small and cold, tucked behind a set of gray double doors in a building that used to be a bank. No cameras, no court stenographer, Just a table, 4 chairs, and 3 officials with notepads, and no patience for drama. I didn't dress up for it. No war paint, no lawyer beside me this time. Just me, my file, and the facts. I spoke for less than 5 minutes. Laid it out in plain language. No theatrics. My address, the forged lease, the doorbell footage, the relocation of my belongings without consent. I didn't flinch when I said the word coercion. Didn't blink when I said fraud. Kalista didn't show. Vera came alone. She sat 2 chairs away from me and crossed her arms, still wearing her charity board pin, as if that could grant her some kind of immunity. After the officials reviewed everything, one of them, a middle-aged woman with soft eyes and 0 tolerance, spoke on behalf of the panel. These actions constitute an intentional act of coercion and housing misrepresentation. The tenant of record remains Maylee Whitlow. The family in question is liable for administrative fines. This ruling will be entered into the public record. No apology was required. I hadn't asked for one. They erased me in private. I exposed them in public. 2 days later, I heard through Henley that Kalista's brand deals had been pulled. Her Instagram page went dark. Parenting forums posted statements distancing themselves. One group wrote, "We do not support influencers who manipulate family narratives for personal gain." The GoFundMe had been removed, flagged for misrepresentation. Donations were refunded. People began whispering about Vera too. Why she stepped down from the community board, why her usual leadership and family life column didn't appear in this month's church bulletin. Wendell, I was told, hadn't shown up at the diner in weeks. And I was home. It wasn't grand. My apartment still smelled faintly of new paint and hand-me-down furniture, but every inch of it belonged to me. There were no curated mantles, no plaques about blessings or legacy, just blank walls waiting for truth. That morning, I unpacked the final box, the one labeled, "Start Here." Inside was a set of photo frames. I placed them along the hallway, but not in chronological order. They weren't a timeline. They were a reminder, a reclamation. There was one of me holding my sonogram, smiling, not the polished, posed kind of smile, the tired, earned kind. Another of Henley and I, standing outside her garage after the mediation, both holding iced coffees like shields, and a final one of me, alone, framed in soft light by the window, journal open on my lap. I stuck a note above them, handwritten in black ink. Chosen, not inherited. Later that day, I felt a soft kick. I placed my hand on my belly and whispered, "We're okay." That night, I opened my mailbox and found a letter. It was from Vera. Her handwriting was smaller than usual, less flourish. The envelope had no return address, just my name. Inside, "We didn't know how much we were hurting you. Please reconsider coming back into the family." I didn't cry. I folded the letter, walked it out to the courtyard trash bin, and dropped it inside without ceremony. Then I walked back into my apartment, sat down at my desk, opened my journal, and wrote one sentence. The family I needed didn't show up. I did. I closed the book, turned out the light, and locked the door behind me. And that's the difference between being let go and letting go.